Welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast. Our goal is to help you, the technology professional, accelerate your career progression, increase your job satisfaction, and be more effective in your existing role.
We want to bring listeners like you the career advice we wish we'd been given earlier in our careers.
I'm John White, at VJourneyman on Twitter, sharing co-host duties with Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_.
We're two former IT operations guys who have moved on to pre-sales roles with technology vendors. We have our opinions, but we also like to highlight the journeys of others and see what we can learn from them.
We'd also like to ask for your feedback to make this a conversation, not a one-way broadcast. Email us at nerdjourneypodcast@gmail.com or DM us at nerdjourney on Twitter. So come join us on our nerd journey.
Let's take a trip. Episode 281. How long would it take you to figure out something you were doing just wasn't for you, wasn't the right thing, wasn't something that you enjoyed in a job? Our guest this week is Amy Arnold. She's a pre-sales systems engineer at Fortinet focused on public sector customers. And in the beginning, Amy thought she was going to be an attorney. But after 5 days focused on pre-law, she decided to drop out of the program and that it wasn't for her. In fact, she decided to take some courses on networking. And something just clicked. Even though she was a novice, she had an extreme interest in this area and kept learning more and more. There was an interest, and she thought it was something that she would really enjoy doing. You'll find that Amy's path into technology and focusing on networking really contains a theme of exploration and trying a number of different things. In fact, her first job in technology wasn't even focused on network engineering. In this first part of our discussion with Amy, you'll hear about when she got an official job as a network engineer, about her time spent learning project management, how she got into the public sector as a technologist, and what made her want to become a consultant. Let's get you straight to the action with part one of our discussion with Amy Arnold.
Amy Arnold, welcome to the Nerd Journey Podcast.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like maybe what your job is today and who you work for?
Absolutely. So I am a systems engineer for Fortinet, and I am on the pre-sale side. So I do a lot of solution architecting. I am specifically public sector focused. So SLED, state and local education, and local gov. And I meet with customers and I help them figure out how we can help solve problems with the technology we have.
I think I'd like to talk a little bit about that job, but before we get there, maybe could we go back to kind of your origin story when you first gained an interest in technology in general, and then maybe had a career that bent in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I, like many in this field, did not get into it in any kind of traditional way. I actually thought I was going to be an attorney. I graduated college, went to law school for a week and decided, nope, this isn't it. And I dropped out with, I'll be honest with you, not much of a plan. I knew I needed to figure out what I wanted to do now that I was grown up. And I ended up taking several different classes at local colleges. And I settled on a programming class and a networking class. And the coding class was fine, but the networking class, it was amazing. I still remember my instructor when she told me what a router was for the first time. And I was like, tell me more about that. I really want to know. And so I was hooked. I took all the classes they had to offer in networking and ended up with a certificate in networking. And then I took certification tests as well.
There's generally some kind of technical background or interest that people have, which leads them to go, oh, I'm going to take a programming class. I'm going to take a networking class. What was that for you?
Yeah. So I had grown up with technology. My dad was in the tech field as a coder. And I really thought I was going to push away from that because I didn't want to just do something because my dad did it. I didn't feel like I was necessarily compelled to do technology other than I was just familiar with it. And then after dropping out of law school, trying a few things, realizing, man, maybe there's something there. And like I said, coding for me is okay. I can do it given enough time, but the networking aspect of it just clicked for me. And so much of technology really does. I didn't see myself in that role growing up, but kind of just got over it and was like, well, I'm really good at it. Why not give it a try and see what area of technology might be a good fit? And that's what I did. Honestly, like I said, I didn't know what an IP address was until I took this first class and learned what a switch was and a router was. And the rest was kind of history from that point.
So 5 days of exposure was enough to kind of let you know that you didn't want to be an attorney, but a few days into exposure into networking was enough to realize that you did have an interest and maybe enough to explore to see if you had a passion.
Absolutely. And I really did think that an attorney was a great path for me because I did enjoy pre-law classes, but the actual practice of law or just being there, I don't know if any of y'all, maybe that's a good discussion to have at some point, is if you've ever been at a job or in a place where you're just like, this isn't it. People ask me all the time, like, what was it about it? I was like, I don't know. I just knew that this wasn't it. And I didn't want to spend a full year because they were like, we'll do a year. And I was like, I don't want to do a year because then I'll have wasted a year. On the networking side of things with the courses, I was like, well, I'm going to take the next one and the next one. And I just knew that this was what I wanted to do. It was kind of taking a chance. It was a lot taking a chance. I have a very understanding family, but it worked out really well.
I like the fail fast mentality there. Either fail fast or gain value fast. But what I am wondering is, as John said, a short time period allowed you to figure out law wasn't it. But a short time period also allowed you to figure out you had this extreme interest and propensity to do networking. So once you land on something like that, how do you figure out what to do with it from there to translate it into this is where I can get a job and get paid to do something? Does that make sense?
It really does. And I will admit to being very clueless getting started because I just learned what a router was. So I'm just learning about the places in which configuring routers would be useful, right? But fortunately, the program that I went through was at a local college. It was a flex entry program. I had a kid at the time, an infant. And so I was able to stay with her during the day and go take classes and do labs at night. And what's great about this program is they had a ton of hands-on, which was awesome. And they had instructors that had been in the field. They were telling you all of the useful things. This was a very enablement-focused program. It was, I'm going to send people, no, they're not going to be senior network engineers when we send them out, but they're going to be capable network engineers when we send them out. And so that was really great for me. But that's where I got the information.
Interesting. So I guess it makes sense if you're going through a program which has a goal of turning out a reasonably skilled entry-level network engineer. It's kind of a guided path, a little bit more of a guided path. I guess the same way as if you're, going to law school, the goal is to be a lawyer. You just don't know what kind of law you'd be practicing, right? And there's a lot of different things that you can do in network engineering as well. So I guess that makes sense. I do have to say that I know Nick has a older kid than I do, but I have a 2-year-old. I don't know about having an infant and going to school. That feels like a superhuman feat to me. That's amazing.
And being the mom too.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Did you have support to do that or how did that work?
I did. So fortunately, my husband, who happens to be a software engineer, coders are part of my life. He was able to be at home in the evening consistently. So that helped. I was able to study and go through the materials when the baby napped and played. I could do that. So that was really helpful because I could learn at my own pace for a lot of that, which was actually really quickly for so much of it. I didn't expect to necessarily take to it so quickly, but I was able to. I was able to, because the way that this program was structured, you didn't have to wait and finish a class a semester or something like that. You could cram 3 or 4 of them into the semester if you went through all of the materials. Now, I didn't want to rush through and not understand things. So I took time to do that pretty quickly. I was able to complete everything in maybe a year and a half to do that, and then spent time doing the cert test after that.
Do they have a partnership with employers and try to connect people who go through the program to an employer? Or is it kind of like you get some guidance from your professors and whatnot, and then you go out into the world and just look?
It's a little of both. I happen to be on the advisory board for this program still. So I'm able to kind of keep in touch with them and actually help develop curriculum for the practical skills and things like that. And they do have some internship programs that they can align the right students with. I didn't happen to get my first job with that program. They didn't have so much of the employment at that time that I remember. It's been about 20 years now. So it's hard to remember exactly if I just didn't see it or didn't ask about it, but I know that they do now, and have for many years. So they'll have some internships that they can funnel kids to. I say kids, they were young. They seem young. They're college.
Can we just dig in on the advisory board comment real quick? What does that entail? If I'm going to be on the advisory board for something, what do I do for that organization?
So standard networking answer, it depends, right? But for this particular program, they have an industry advisory board because it is such a technical program. They want to produce candidates that have hands-on skills, useful skills, ready, entry-level skills ready to go. So they have an industry advisory board that we meet with the faculty, and we go through, these are the classes that are on the agenda right now. Should we remove any of these? Should we be adding anything? What skills are we looking for? What might we be missing? So in those transitions over years where maybe cloud became more a thing, right? And some other technologies took a back seat, they would adjust the program. These days, now that there's more automation and scripting, they teach more automation and scripting for those candidates. So that's my role. I'm in that. And they meet a couple times a year to do that. It's great to have gone through the program and get to contribute and see the candidates that are coming out of that program as well. It's really great. I'm actually mentoring several that have gone through that program, and that's pretty cool.
That's really cool. Kudos to you for taking the time, because that's extra time in addition to your job that they probably don't pay you for, if I had to guess.
No, they do not. No, but it is good. Especially I've got an opportunity. Not all of the women that I'm mentoring right now are in that program, but I've actually got several women that I'm mentoring in network engineering as well. I mean, I want more people in network engineering in general, but especially helping women engineers get started is something that I really enjoy doing. And
how does the advice that you might give to those you're mentoring today who are women, how does that compare and or contrast to your experience when you kind of got into the industry?
So one of the reasons I tend to seek out opportunities to mentor women, especially, is that I didn't really have any official mentor. I just didn't have that. But I had a lot of unofficial mentors when I got involved in groups on Twitter and packet pushers and Tech Field Day and things like that. A lot of people that they may not know they were my mentors because I didn't say, hey, you are my mentor now. But a lot of people that I learned from and watched and gained skills from. So if I can help women getting started that maybe don't have those same connections get started, I feel really strongly about that, because a lot of network engineering positions, especially getting started, are like you're a party of one potentially, and it may just not be not just networks you're responsible for. So you might wear several different hats. That's tough to do when you're on your own. So getting the right resources, helping people, giving them the support that they need, I think that's important in the industry. And I think that's something network engineering community does really well.
What communities are out there for the network engineer and potential network engineer? Because John and I, we came up in the Spiceworks community more for the technology generalist, a lot of the time small business, but they had a mix of people. But we were more generalist systems administrators who got into virtualization?
So there's obviously unofficial, there's Slack channels and things like that. And then there's groups like Packet Pushers that has a Slack channel, and Twitter and LinkedIn. Also, I love this question because I happen to co-lead the DFW network user group with Craig. And I love that group. It's so fun. It's a great time of nerds hanging out, talking nerdy networking stuff. It's fantastic. So, local DFW folks listening to this, come on out. And then there's also, I'm in cybersecurity. So there's several groups, Women in Cyber, as well as one. I was able to go to a WESIS conference recently in Nashville. That was amazing. It was all women in cybersecurity. And that was great. I've never been to that one before until this year. And that was fantastic. Fortinet sent me, and it was a really great experience. So there's a lot of different groups, depending on what your major interest is. But those networking user groups are forming, I think there's 38 of them now or more. Those are probably my favorite as far as just pure networking groups.
I'm guessing that's more of like a vendor agnostic network talk, or how does that work?
So the networking user groups, there's the USNUA that we all roll up to, and they help find the venues, pay the contracts for the venues, things like that, which makes the administration of a group a lot easier. And they are vendor neutral. So all of the talks are vendor neutral. They're on vendor neutral slides. Vendors can sponsor them, but they're not giving talks. And you're not supposed to corner anybody and try to sell them anything. So it's a great experience to just go and talk and meet people. We have people from all sorts of vendors that are there. Then we have end user and network engineers, partner network engineers, the whole gamut. So it's really great because everyone's got a different view of what networking is, and they're bringing that to the table.
Oh, that's so cool. I'll have to get out to one of those since you have a Dallas one.
I was going to say, it's really fun. I think our next one's going to be in August. It'll be great.
Have to put that on my list for sure. Okay, let's do this. We talked about how your mentoring of other women was to be a mentor for them that you didn't have, and basically tell them about communities that maybe you did or did not know about. So once you got into that first networking job, what was that experience like? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So my first actual technical job had very little networking, which was kind of a bummer. I think my official title was special projects because they wanted to hire me. They knew I had technical skills, but they didn't know what they wanted to do with these skills because their switches were unmanaged switches. So I learned servers. That's actually where I got my MCSE while I was there. Did a little bit of desktop stuff, but not a super great amount of networking, which is a little bit disappointing. But I did get a chance to do some more certifications and kind of hone some more networking skills, just practicing at home and doing all of that. So continuing in that, but getting paid to do other things. And then an opportunity came up to do project management with a company that was related to the company that I first worked for. It was something I'd been curious about. And so I jumped and went to do that because I wasn't really letting go of a lot of networking at that point. And I thought I'll do this technical project integration type stuff and got my PMP. And I did that for about 8 months and decided that I love doing project plans for myself. And I love having rollback plans. And I love ironing out how the config's going to look and what we're going to do and when we're going to do it. The actual project management where you have to herd cats and get people to do their job, did not love that. So I'm glad I tried it. And that's one thing as we kind of talk through like career choices. I think sometimes you have to try things and maybe they're not your favorite thing. And you learn that about yourself. I ultimately gave that up. And as soon as a network engineer, like a pure network engineer job came across, I applied and I got it. It was kind of an adventure there. But my first probably 2 years in tech was not a ton of networking, ton of technology, but not a ton of pure networking.
And did the companies that hired you, did they see the networking background and coursework you had taken as relatable experience? Like, well, you've done this, you could probably do this other thing too. Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, I think it was. It was. They needed somebody to fulfill, and it was kind of an all hats kind of role. And there was networking in it. It just wasn't a lot of networking. They weren't doing a lot of complicated there was no BGP going on, there wasn't any of that going on. No, HA redundancy, stuff like that. It was, we have these switches and some of them have an IP address and most of them don't. It just gave me an opportunity. That's one thing. Every job that I've had, I've learned a lot. So I ended up learning a lot about servers, learning that I like networking better than servers, but being competent in server and sysadmin stuff is kind of a necessary thing. Learned some endpoint stuff, just doing general stuff like that. But project management was one where I just decided that, wow, that's cool, but I'm moving on.
Yeah. Well, you seem to have this, I'll call it a fast filter, like a per packet forwarding filter, to use SD-WAN terminology, right? You've got the SD-WAN devices that do the per packet
awesome.
forwarding to the best uplink, right? And I see you doing that per packet forwarding to the strongest uplink in the things that you like, and figuring out to, you know what, I'm just going to drop these packets on the stuff that I don't like. So I guess trying to give that advice back to other people as to how they can figure out whether they like and enjoy or would enjoy doing something for a long time compared to not. Like, what are the thoughts and feelings that go through your mind, and what's your energy level like when you do something you really enjoy versus maybe you don't? I'm real curious about that.
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, because it is trying to understand, especially getting started in networking, which has so many areas of its own, what you're going to focus in and what you're going to like. It's hard to know. And sometimes you have to just get the job and start working in the job, and then figure out, well, no, this is okay, but I really think this other thing might be a better fit. And sometimes you have to separate that from, I'm new at this and I suck at this, but I will get better. And this is not for me. So like project management, I was good at it, got better at it, but ultimately was like, nah, this isn't for me. Networking, I started out and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so green. I don't know these things. It stresses me out, but it got better and better. And I enjoyed that. So just separating that from I'm not good at it, but I really like it and I will get better, to this is just not for me. And sometimes you have to stay in a position for longer than you want to get the other position. But what I found and what I love about networking is that if you really know your stuff and you can show people that you really know your stuff, you can transition between a lot of different things. So it's really hard to get bored, and it's a lot easier than some fields to move into something that you enjoy more.
Maybe I'm reading into this a little bit, but it sounded a little bit like you were recommending that people maybe explore a little bit more than we, I don't know, quote unquote, traditionally think, the way our careers are going to go. Like, people seem to have this, oh, I want to be, and then they'll say some like terminal title, like a CTO or an SVP of XYZ, and then they'll backtrace like every role that they need to have before that in this like linear fashion. But you had already once before had this like idea of, well, just because I make a plan doesn't mean that that's the plan that's right for me, like not knowing everything about every step along that plan.
Yeah.
That exploration phase, is that something that you would recommend that people maybe do a little bit more at the beginning of their careers?
I think so. I personally think that folks who start out in help desk are some of the best network engineers I know, because they got to see so many pieces of how things are put together, because the applications and they had to translate what an end user was saying, that's a skill in itself, man.
It's a second language, right?
It really is. If you can master that, you got a good start. And I think that just kind of getting an idea of what is the most interesting pieces of it to you. But I think that's going to be hard to tell in some of these networking, like until you do it, until you set up an access point and deal with wireless. Do you know if you like wireless? I mean, you know that you like having internet and you like having wireless at your house. Do you actually like working with RF? Maybe not. Maybe you do. So I do think that it's good to do that. I think that one thing folks sometimes try to skip, though, is those fundamentals. I don't think you can skip those. I think you have to understand basic networking, before you start branching out into cybersecurity, into wireless, into voice, into those different areas, you still can't skip, here's what a VLAN is, here's what spanning tree here is, these are how link state protocols work, those things. I'm not sure I answered your question directly either, but I do think that you should try things that you think you're interested in, but don't feel like that's it. I've made this decision. I'm stuck here forever now. There's so many other things to do. There's no reason to sit there and do a thing that you really don't want to do, at least in networking, at least in my opinion.
I think you definitely answered my question.
I take some tangents the long way around.
So when is it that you feel like you kind of hit your stride then? You did some exploring in multiple roles, it sounds like. And then it all was along this theme of networking as you kind of got into that groove there, realized that, hey, some of this other stuff that's associated with it is interesting, but again, still not my passion. It's back to this core networking and some of the things, that are, specialties along those lines. What is it that kind of clicked with you with that role?
I think for the first network engineering role that I took, just being able to actually apply all of this stuff that I'd built up in my brain over, certification tests and courses, and just like, an opportunity to do that was great. And I really felt like that was scary, but awesome. So, and that's really the time when I started seeking out other network engineers. That first role it was me and some not updated documentation. It was a really great time to just start putting things in place and really making things that you had done in labs make sense why you would do it in production, or why these things matter, which you kind of knew in theory, but doing it in practice was really good. And that was kind of validating that I loved that job, because I'm pretty sure I would. Whereas law school was 5 days and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't. Networking, I was like, I'm pretty sure I'll really like this. And so it was really great. And one of the nice things, I'll give a plug for public sector. You may not get paid as much in public sector, but you will often get an opportunity just to do and try all the things and get to do things that maybe bigger companies they'll put you in a little tiny box and you're like, you can do this one thing. Public sector needs people, and they need people who are smart and can do a lot of different things and adapt. And you just get a ton of experience very quickly. That was really enjoyable about doing that.
You kind of explained that feeling of clicking in. Oh, this is definitely it. And the things that I'm exploring here and experiencing are what I want to pursue. And maybe there's specialties in and among this area, but it's definitely this area.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded like you knew that kind of early. To get your foot in the door, you had to explore some other things. But then when you got tracked in and back in this area, it was, okay, yeah, this is it.
Yes, for sure.
That recognition, I guess confirmation of what you had experienced in the certificate program.
Yeah, absolutely. I stayed longer than 5 days at my networking job.
What did progression look like there? Were you able to upskill in multiple different areas and explore in multiple different areas in that position? Or did it take for you to get your public sector job in order to do that?
So the public sector job that I took did give me a chance to learn a lot of areas of networking, because it was all the things. And in fact, when I first started, I had domain controllers and a Citrix deployment that were part of the network team for some reason. And so I was able to really get that holistic picture of how everything works together, which is one of the things that I really like about my job, is being able to see how things go together and in the dependencies and how you can solve problems or create problems in the network with applications and servers and end users and all that together. I was often helping on things that had nothing to do with networking. It must be the network because we don't know what else it is. And as network engineers, we always step in and say, okay, well, it's not the network. Here's the proof, right? But I'm not the type that just leaves it at that. And I don't think most network engineers are. They're like, okay, well, let me help you actually solve the problem. Is it Is it a database problem? Is it an application problem? So you learn a lot through that. I also, learned virtualization with that, which I had not had in any of the certificate program. Yeah, I got to upskill a lot. It was great.
I guess one nugget of information for people listening that I'm hearing as part of this is maybe my title is network engineer. It doesn't mean that I'm just hammering on a switch or an SD-WAN box or messing with the Wi-Fi all day long. Those technologies relate and connect and interact with other things that I might have to go and touch and work with other teams on or work with on my own. Like, to your point earlier, you might be in charge of certain systems that the company has designated to just be as part of the networking team's responsibility. So read your job roles and responsibilities carefully, people, regardless of what it says as the title.
Absolutely. And I do think I hear the term network janitor a lot, right? I mean, a lot of it is cleaning up, and it's not necessarily your mess that you're cleaning up. It's not. But you do often get roped into solving mysteries because a lot of times they just don't know who else to ask and they don't know what else to do. So you learn those troubleshooting skills, mean time to innocence for the network. But that means you need to find them a culprit. So that's one of the reasons I love packet captures, man. Packets don't lie. This is your issue right here. It is definitely a skill that I've gotten much better over the years at because you just practice it so much.
Does public sector automatically mean government, or can it also mean education? Does it mean both? Can you just clarify that for us? Do I need a security clearance, for example?
So it depends. Generally, people mean public sector for anything that is publicly funded. So private universities might not go under public sector. Typically, you'll hear the term SLED with vendors and partners, because that'll include higher ed, whether they're publicly funded or not.
And what does SLED stand for?
State local education. So your state and local government and education. So your ISDs and your higher ed. But generally, the term public sector usually refers to it's public dollars making it happen. So your ISDs and your cities and organizations that are funded with public dollars.
I actually don't know what ISD means either. Sorry.
Oh, independent school district. Sorry. Your school districts, your schools and counties, education.
Are there other nuances to the public sector technologist role, specifically networking? I heard you say you might get an opportunity to do a lot of different things, but are there like weird budget restraints, different types of compliance? What are some of those nuances of that environment that maybe don't apply to I work for a company that's privately held or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk first for local gov, which is what I've spent most of my time in. It is such a wide variety of services that you're dealing with. So I work for a city. You've got parks, you've got animal shelters, you've got public safety, fire, police, dispatchers, you've got permits, building inspectors, public works, literally the streets, the utilities, the sewer, all of these things all have their special applications. Some of them, they're very they've cornered the market. They don't necessarily have to be good. There's not that many applications in that space. You deal with a lot of that. So you're dealing with a lot of different priorities, different sectors, different applications. And you also deal with different compliance, especially in public safety. They have something called CJIS, which is basically criminal background checks, connections to the state, running driver's license, things like that. That all has to be secured. And there's certain rules about the encryption and how that data travels and who can access it. Schools, ISDs, lower ed, they deal with what we call SEPA or SIPA compliance. So they're dealing with basically web filtering for children. You've got to make sure that they can't just access anything. So they deal with those compliance. A lot of things people don't think about, though, is that both schools and local gov deal with credit cards. They try not to store it, but you still have to make sure that you have the right hygiene for taking payments. You have to deal with with websites that folks can interact with. You need to make sure that those are secure, right? So there's a lot of technology involved in public sector, just so much, even especially SCADA for local gov. That's one of the reasons I have a lot of SCADA knowledge, is because that is what's running all the PLCs that is doing the water plants and sewage plants and irrigation and things like that. And schools have that smart boards and a lot of IoT things to deal with. So just a ton of technology, which is why, like I said, they don't necessarily pay enterprise rates for your service, but you can get a wide variety of experience doing it.
I would guess that if I have some type of role in a public sector on my resume, that might make it a little bit easier for me to get a different kind of role within a different public sector entity versus someone from the outside. Is that an accurate guess?
I can't speak for every hiring manager, but absolutely. I did hire for junior positions, and hiring someone else from public sector is nice because you know that they already know what it's like. You mentioned one thing I didn't hit on is budgets. Everything is funded by projects and tax money and grants. There's never enough time, there's never enough money, and there's never enough people. And one of the reasons that I really actually like working in SLED is because those are problems, challenges that I like solving. Is how are we going to get the quality and the service that they need, solve these problems, given these constraints, which are substantial in many cases. Can't just buy the Cadillac. You've got to figure out how to put a solution together that works within the budget that they have.
And is that something you understood as well as you just articulated while you were working inside technology operations at a public sector facility? Or was it only after you transitioned to something different?
No, actually, while I was working at a city, that was something we were all very well aware of, is how are we going to get these things funded? Because the way most municipalities work, and even the way ISCs work, is you ask for these things, and then a board or a council decides if you're going to get them. And so you have to prioritize the solutions, and depending on, tax revenue and things like that, because especially at a city, you have all of these competing interests. IT is not the only one asking for things. They need to replace big water mains and, whatever, build, new fire stations, things like that. Those take money. So everyone's asking for money, and you're not going to get all the money. So it's dividing up that pie. But yeah, that's definitely something, and how purchasing works, because there's purchasing regulations as well for public sector. There's a lot of eyes on public sector. You have to show you're being responsible with money and that you're not taking kickbacks. You have to be above board.
Yeah. Knowledge of the industry is important, not just knowledge of the tech.
Absolutely. Yeah. And seeing how you can align that tech with the business goals is, something I definitely learned working on the job, and something that why I was able to slide into the role that I have now more easily than other, is because I have had those conversations and made those justifications and knew what would get approved or not approved.
Yeah. Speaking of that transition, I don't think you went from working local government straight to a technology vendor, right? There were some steps in between. Can you just describe what the next step on that journey was and how you knew that it was an opportunity for you and a good path forward? Because this is one of those points where I think not everyone knows that this could be a progression path for me on my journey, kind of thing.
Absolutely. So I decided to do a stint in consulting. My husband at the time was seriously considering teaching on a high school level. So I was like, we both can't work for the government, man. So I decided I was going to try consulting. I had wanted to do that. And I decided to move into a role that had a mentor's kind of setup where I would be a mentee, and there would be a senior person. And I also made a choice to go into a specific product, a specific technology, which was voice over IP. And I was like, I wanted to see what it would be like to know something really deeply. And I did this for several years. I was really good at consulting. Consulting is a whole different animal A lot of our customers were public sector customers, but it's a different world. You are drinking from the fire hose all the time. People are constantly setting their own environments on fire and they're calling you to fix it. It's a lot of fun. It's also got some high stress to it. So I definitely recommend folks who think they might want to do it, give it a try. Ultimately, I decided I liked being the demanding customer. I'm kind of an OCD control person. I like having more input before things are lit on fire. And so ultimately I did go back to being the demanding customer, but it's a great experience. You learn how to talk to customers and you see a lot of different environments. You learn what works really well, what maybe doesn't work really well. You meet a lot of different people. You do a lot of different things.
I really enjoyed that discussion with Amy about the nuances of working in the public sector as a technologist and hearing about all the different levels of technology that are present just within a city, all the different compliance regulations that are present based on what you're talking about. Maybe that is another way for technologists listening to this to gain some additional experience that you're not getting working at a publicly traded or privately held company in what we call the private sector, something that's not funded by public dollars. Amy emphasized the need to learn networking fundamentals. That's TCP/IP networking fundamentals. And that can give us the basis for gauging an interest in a technology where we might want to place our future focus, or a specific area where we might want to place our future focus. And if you don't believe in focusing on the fundamentals as a way to expose yourself to different areas that you might enjoy or might be valuable to your career from an experience and increase in pay standpoint, go back and listen to episodes 263 and 264 with our guest Brad Christian. He uses this focus on the fundamentals as a guideline to where he's going to make technology bets and how he determines which certifications to pursue. So I think that's a great resonance of that same idea present in the discussion with Amy. And you also heard that she moved to consulting because she had a desire to be deeply skilled in something. That decision to focus on VoIP or voice over IP technologies only came after an exposure to the fundamentals. If you never worked with voice over IP, how do you know if you're going to like doing it as part of your job? So it was an area of interest for her, and she got to focus on that full time for a while in consulting. But there's another lesson for us here. She did focus on it as a consultant for a period of time. But if you were to ask her right now, does she focus on her job at Fortinet solely on voice over IP? Absolutely not. That's not the only thing within her purview. So yes, she did pick a specialty for a time, but that doesn't mean you can't come back and choose something a bit broader and use that specialty to make you even better as a generalist, or even the other way. If you choose to go in a broader direction, maybe that exposure can then make you a better specialist. So you're not locked in forever. That's really important to understand. We talked about some technical communities specifically for network engineers, some that we haven't even mentioned before. The US NUA, or the US Networking User Association. That's a vendor-neutral environment to talk about networking. And Amy mentioned being one of the co-leaders of the Dallas-Fort Worth Networking User Group. So all those networking user groups are sponsored by the US NUA. We'll put the link in the show notes if you'd like to go out and be a part of one of those groups to meet other network engineers. Maybe that's a place to find some mentors or seek advice on progressing as a network engineer if that's something that you want to do. Of course, we also heard the mention of the Packet Pushers community. That's a great one. You can join and find other like-minded individuals as part of that technical community. We never said the words quality of service in that discussion. From a technical perspective, we put quality of service rules in place to make sure that in times of bandwidth saturation on circuits for network traffic, we can prioritize the right type of traffic, just like we would prioritize voice over IP traffic. But I feel like Amy was able to apply quality of service at a whole different level. She was able to do this for the things that she learned about, and she was able to prioritize topics and areas that were both interesting to learn, but also that she felt would be interesting to do as a job or work in as a profession. And then she was willing to do that experimentation, that exploration phase to go and try it. And if she liked it, she continued doing it. If she didn't, then she might make a slight adjustment. I will say, I can't imagine trying to do some of that as the parent of a young child like Amy did, that self-study set of networking courses that she was able to take. So just remember, as you progress in your career, as you spend time studying and learning new things, progressing into different areas, changing jobs, it's really important that we have support from our friends and family and others around us to be able to do those kinds of things and make those kinds of choices. I hope that no matter who you are, you have someone out there, whether it's friend, family, or otherwise, supporting your desire to improve in what you do now and improve your overall future career. Next week, we'll learn a little bit more about how Amy went from consulting to working for a technology vendor. Tune in next week to hear the full story.
Farewell, listeners. Tune in next time as the journey continues. I'm John White at VJourneyman, for Nick Cordy at NetworkNerd_, signing off.
Adios.